Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Heal with Kat podcast. My name is Kat and I am your host. And if you are new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome back to the episode. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so grateful that you're here. This episode this week is going to be a little bit different from the usual educational stuff that I put out on the podcast, simply because for the last week I was in Kauai. And I have nothing educational to share with you. Honestly, I feel like I have so much to share in terms of things that I've kind of downloaded or kind of figured out about myself on the trip. I feel like with every trip that I go on, stepping outside of my reality and really being in a new environment and being in nature and being in Kauai, which is like the most sacred place ever, I was just open in so many different ways to receiving insight, like I said, downloads, and just wisdom from beings, from myself, from the island itself that I really, really wanted to share. On Instagram, I posted a 4-part series post on all of the beautiful places that I went, all of the amazing food that I had, and I'm going to share that with you today in the episode. So we got invited to go on the trip, and by we, I mean Tyler and I, by his mom and stepdad. They are regular vacationers of Kauai, specifically Kauai. They've been to Maui and they've been to other places, other islands as well, but Kauai is their favorite. And I always saw on Tyler's Instagram when we like first started becoming friends and like chatting, I would always see his highlights on his page of his travels and adventures, and a lot of them were in Kauai. And I was like, if I get to experience going to Kauai with them one day, that would be so cool, because they seem like they've been so often that there's so many amazing things that they can show me with the island. And every single time that I've been to Hawaii on any island, it's been for work. Like I went as a kid, maybe I went when I was 3, and I went when maybe I was like 10, and then I think I went in my early 20s, and that wasn't for work. That was with family. But we were at a hotel and we didn't really like do excursions. Like we didn't do the things that maybe like I would have wanted to do. I was kind of just like going along with whatever. But the last time I went to Maui, I was just there for work. So I was so excited to go to Kauai, a new island I'd never been to before, and experience it through the lens of my boyfriend and his family. And they're big foodies. They like to try foods like I do, and they like to hike like I do, and they like to relax and read like I like. I feel like all the things that I like to do, they like to do. Tyler and I like to do. So it was a trip I was really, really looking forward to. And astrologically and energetically, the last few months have honestly been wild and crazy. Closing out the astrological new year, my first winter in Colorado, and then opening up the energy of the new year in March with the spring equinox, and then all of the things that have been changing in my business and settling into the house and life. I've kind of just realized finally at 33 years old that life doesn't slow down. It's not going to slow down. And if you want it to slow down, you have to make an intentional effort to slow down in your life. And so I literally told Tyler at the beginning of the year, I feel like this year is going to be very busy and I don't feel like things are going to slow down. We should like make sure that we take a trip once, twice, 3 times a year. I mean, we're not married. We don't have kids. We have people to watch the dogs. Like, might as well do what we can now. And that's not to say that I wouldn't travel with kids. I actually really aspire to be the kind of mom who feels courageous enough to travel with a kid, because I think it's really good for them. And I think that it just opens their eyes up to the world. And I traveled a lot as a kid, and I don't remember a lot of my childhood, but the things that I do remember are the travels that I went on. So anyway, so I just felt like having travel to look forward to break up the year would be a really great way to get out of the routine and see the world and travel and just, I mean, all the amazing things that come with travel, which is like trying new foods and seeing new cultures and getting your body and energies of new places. And I think Kauai was the best place for us to go at this time of the year because we're just coming out of winter and it's our first time living in winter. And it's not to say that we don't enjoy Denver. There's parts of Denver that we love. But it's just different when you're not near a beach and you've grown up near a beach your whole life. So in saying all of that, going to Kauai at this time of the year was literally perfect for us. I booked us the flights direct. So we just went from Denver to Kauai, which I'm so grateful that there's a direct flight. And it was pretty long. It was like 8 hours. But man, when you get on the plane, you literally just like shut down social media. You shut down the rest of the world. You're literally stuck on this floating piece of metal in the sky, which is actually terrifying when you think about it. And you are in silence. So I slept, I read. So you're on the plane, right? You're like disconnected from reality. You're in your own world and you're just like, you have all this time to do anything that you want. And for me, I hadn't picked up my Kindle in a while and I hadn't been reading. I was doing a lot of like checking out emotionally because I've been so busy with work. I was like, I'm going to just read a book on my Kindle. Like, I'm just going to zone out into something and not watch Netflix because I've been doing that to check out for so long. I'm going to try to see if I can like play with my energy a little bit. So I pulled out my Kindle and I opened it up to the book that I had most recently read on my Kindle, which is Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. And I really don't know like what it is about past lives that I am so significantly drawn to, but there is something about past lives, the soul's purpose, the lessons we're supposed to learn. Like I'm so fascinated with that. I read Many Lives, Many Masters in probably like less than 48 hours. I'm not even kidding. I could not put the book down. And I was looking at my library of books on my Kindle and I was just kind of like, all right, like I just read Many Lives, Many Masters. Like I've read Journey of Souls 100 times. Like I'm scrolling through. Anyways, I ended up clicking on Many Lives, Many Masters, and underneath on the Kindle, it showed other books by Brian Weiss. So one of them said what the title was Same Soul, Many Bodies, Discover the Healing Power of Future Lives Through Progression Therapy. And that was all I needed to read to know that that was the book I wanted to read on the trip. And I ended up finishing it within the first like 2 days of the trip. I finished half of it on the plane and half of it the next day. I could not put this book down. I was literally obsessed with every single word, every single message, every single download that Brian Weiss was sharing in the book. And the reason that the future self was so interesting to me is because I've deeply been working with my future self lately. About a month ago during the eclipse, I did a Christ consciousness mutation and healing, energy healing, through a woman named Reverend Frances Spaden. I follow her podcast. It's called Magnify Your Miracles. My cousin shared her with me and she works deeply with Mother Mary. So of course I was like, sure, I'll add her to my queue. And she said that she has started to do energy healings with Christ consciousness. Well, I work deeply with Christ consciousness within family constellation therapy. So all these things started to align. So I did it. It was super transformational. And in that meditation and healing that I did with her, I felt my future self stand in front of me. And she said to my guides who I felt around me, is she ready for me? And I said, yes, I'm ready. And I felt her like a ghost or like a light body just walk over, lay herself into me. And then there was my own resistance for her integrating into my heart, my throat, my third eye, and my crown. I let her integrate like halfway into me. And then I panicked and I was like, oh my God, because the future self is literally, it's uncertain. It's just like, I don't know, am I making a huge life change by accepting her into me, even though I want her? It's kind of this like fear of the unknown. finally I took a deep breath and I just said, I allow, I allow, I allow. And she fully integrated into my body. After that, I felt a surge of energy in my nervous system, in my body, in my bones, in my energy, in my aura. Everything lit up gold. And I was just like, okay, she's here and she's going to start integrating. She's going to start coming in. From that point, I got diagnosed with SIBO, and I had this kind of thought in the back of my head, keep working towards that future version of you. Keep asking her to show you, what does it look like when we heal SIBO? What does it look like when we heal our boundaries? What does it look like when we heal all the themes around the SIBO and the gut issues and boundaries and personal power and self-trust and being seen, like all the things that I was working on. And so there was this like perfect moment on the plane where I was like, oh, okay. So I'm feeling an inner call in my heart towards the future self. I've been trying to work with my future self. Maybe this book has some nuggets of wisdom around my future self that I can learn from. Maybe my future self will speak to me through this book, and I will learn how to have a better relationship with her. Because the hard part about working with the future self is that it is the unknown. It's a reality that we've never been in before. And sometimes it's hard for us to visualize or even dream up what that version of us would look like, because like I said, it's never existed. And many times when I'm in family constellation therapy and I'm asking the client, what are we working towards? I usually always put some kind of future self paper in the field at the end to help integrate the healing and to give that future self version of my client an opportunity to start walking towards the client so that they can then merge and they can both support each other. And most people say, I don't really know. I know that I want to feel peace. I know that I want to, make more money. I want to do this. I want to do that. And it's really interesting to watch the progression of how the future self unfolds as the more that we get to know them. That happens with my long-term clients where, I see them once a month for 6 months. And then by the end of the 6 months, they're like, I know exactly what I'm working towards, but the beginning they didn't. Well, I'm in the beginning. I don't know what I'm working towards. All I know is that I want to heal my SIBO and I want to heal all the things that are attached emotionally, physically, and spiritually to the SIBO. So in opening this book, I'm going to read some of my favorite notes from it. And I literally highlighted the shit out of this book. I could not put it down. But I think what was so interesting about the book in general was Dr. Brian Weiss is so clear about communicating with us on what the future self can show us about today, but also how the future self is connected to our past lives. If I were to ever write a book, I would want to write a book like Dr. Brian Weiss, because he uses client stories and then he talks about the themes with the clients. I just think it's so powerful. So in the book, he talks a lot about the future self, and he talks a lot about how the future self shows up in the future of Earth. So a lot of the clients that he's hypnotizing are telling him about their future selves in future lives. And they're talking about what the world is like in 600, 700, 800 years. It's interesting because he hypnotizes all these people that don't know each other, and they're literally all saying the same thing, which is so fascinating. And the kind of collective thought about the next 1,000 years on Earth is we are going to go through a massive death and rebirth. And it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be ugly. It's apocalyptic in some ways, ego and power and nuclear war and all of these things, they kind of reach their peak. Earth gets destroyed in some capacity by humans, and then the planet basically has a rebirth of some kind energetically, and then everything is at peace. It makes me think of living off the grid, and you think of peaceful living, and there's no democracy or hierarchy or patriarchy. That's the next 1,000 after the next 1,000 years of our planet, which is really interesting. One of the coolest things I learned in the book, Same Soul, Many Bodies, and how he connects the future self to the current self to the past life self, is that we as souls have an opportunity to constantly evolve and grow. And sometimes that means that our souls will step into the shoes of the people that we judge the most, or we're the most prejudiced against, or even hate. And he talks about how having compassion for ourselves is really healing, but how that individual compassion then ripples out into the collective of the planet. And he talks about the difference between empathy and compassion. He says, when you understand another's feelings as your own and you are able to put yourself in his or her place, you will almost surely become compassionate towards that person. But you can also be compassionate without empathy. He says that compassion comes from the heart, and it is illustrated by being kind and benevolent to all beings. And he uses a example about Christ and Gandhi. He says that compassion is more instinctual, while empathy is more intellectual. And they come from different places. So I'm just going to read you an excerpt from this book because I thought it was so profound, because he talks about family with it, and it's really interesting. So he says, compassion is more instinctual. Empathy is more intellectual. So the empathy is the way that you understand your family. Let's just put it in the terms of family constellation therapy. Empathy is what you understand about your family. You're intellectualizing what happened to your family. But compassion is using a more heart-centered and more instinctual way of understanding and maybe seeing your family, and it's a little bit softer. He gives an example in this part of the book of a dialogue with illness hypnosis practice that you can do in chapter 3. And it talks about like basically stepping into the shoes of somebody else or an illness, and like talking to the illness, talking to a person, and kind of seeing the energy from a different perspective. So he goes on to say, from after doing that exercise, if you change places with, say, your abusive father, you don't necessarily have to be compassionate towards him. You may realize and empathize, wow, my father's father did the same thing to him that he's doing to me. He took the cruel things he learned from his father and his culture and his peers and transmitted them undigested to me. I empathize with what he felt because I understand those feelings, and I'm going to break the transmission of negative behavior because of what I learned. So empathy is what we're doing in family constellation therapy in the beginning and kind of the middle of the session of, okay, wow, I understand my dad was suffering from, mental illness, or there was addiction, and I'm stepping into his shoes and I'm understanding things from his energy and perspective. That's empathy. He goes on to say that empathy is an intellectual exercise. However, ideally, and even in as extreme a case as an abusive father, as you empathize with your father, as you understand your father, you can begin to feel compassion for him. This will be difficult. He may just be as cruel to you as before, but he is an injured human being like yourself. And the realization might allow you a heartfelt response as well as an intellectual one. He says, if you do respond, if you can see beyond your or your family's injuries, you'll find that as empathy and compassion merge, they lead you toward the final destination of all the lessons on the route to immortality: spiritual love, unconditional love, love that is pure and everlasting. I truly could not put down this book, because everything that he talked about, from his own downloads writing the book to the things that his hypnotized clients and past lives were sharing with him about what they were learning with their lives, it was so applicable to the work that I do. I found myself many times reading the book being like, okay, but what if that's spiritually bypassing people's trauma? And I could think about all the clients that I have who are non-contact with their parents and who choose not to have relationships with them. And I'm thinking, well, I don't want to bypass what they're going through. That must feel like a really safe and protective decision for them. But then I'm reminded by something that Spirit told me a very long time ago in my own journey that I continue to apply to family constellation therapy to this day, which is that you can still be non-contact with your family and still have empathy and compassion for them. Your boundary of that no contact may be absolutely 100% valid. I have had moments in my life with my family where I needed to be no contact, or I needed to have very limited contact because it felt safer for me to protect myself, because my boundaries were either constantly being crossed or my needs were not being met, or something about the relationship was really triggering for me. In a weird backwards way, by creating that no contact or limited contact boundary, I was able to feel better about my relationship with them because it was on my terms. And especially when it's with parents, parents are kind of in some ways at the mercy of the way that their children choose to want to be in a relationship with them, especially when they become adults. And so it's kind of like this feeling of, okay, how do we create empathy and compassion for all beings, even if they are no contact with their family? And I always think that the best way to do that is just to cultivate that within ourselves. And Dr. Brian Weiss talks a lot about this in the book, that in order for us to want to make an impact on the collective, to make an impact on the world, we first have to start with it within ourselves. And this is where a lot of people struggle with ancestral healing and healing with their families. And a lot of like turmoil, inner turmoil comes up in family constellation therapy sessions. It's like, I'm not ready to love them, or I'm not ready to forgive them. And I'm like, great, that's okay. That's fine. You may never be ready, and that's your personal choice. However, where can you find more love for you? Where can you forgive you? Like, are you blaming yourself for something? Did you take something on from your family and make it your own? Like, where can we focus on the self to create that freedom? Because honestly, my biggest belief, hate it or love it, is that forgiveness, love, compassion, and understanding equals freedom, period. Like, and whether that's with ourselves or whether that's with our families, for those four fundamental values of my work and what I do, I believe are the reasons that people are able to move forward and find freedom in what happened to them and their families. He also talks in the book about the future self will always be impacted by the present day and the past self. So he talks about it from like the future self backwards, but in his other book, Many Lives, Many Masters, he talks about it from the past life moving forward. I tend to understand the past life moving forward a little bit more than the opposite way. He actually uses a phenomenal example in the book about Saddam Hussein. I'll use an example for Hitler, because for some reason, like with past life stuff, I don't know why all of us do this, but we always go to like the worst case scenario. Like, well, if a reincarnation exists and there's no heaven or hell and there's just like different dimensions, like where's Hitler? Like, why is that the first thing that we think about? I don't know. That's the first thing I thought about. And so when he used the Saddam Hussein example in the book, the first thing I thought about is, so if Hitler's past life was the horrible anti-Semitic and racist white privileged man that he was, if he reincarnates, is he reincarnating into someone who lives in Israel or Gaza, or somebody who is Jewish, so that he can step into their shoes and really truly understand what it's like to be somebody who is put down by society, discriminated against, like treated differently for who they are and their roots and their religion. And so then it makes me think like, okay, so then if he can't like assimilate into that culture, he can't like do that lifetime right, does that mean that then he's going to have to come back as a Jewish person every single lifetime after that until he understands the impact of what he did? Like, these are the things that my brain thinks about, but that's what Dr. Brian Weiss talks about in Many Lives, Many Masters, is that progression. In this book, he talks about how he was able to hypnotize people and go into their future selves and say, okay, George, you're struggling with alcoholism, which I think is one of the anger and alcoholism is one of the examples in here. Well, George couldn't figure out how to heal his anger and his alcoholism. And the past lives that he was looking at were informative, but they weren't necessarily like life-changing enough for him to understand how to move forward. So Dr. Brian Weiss hypnotized him. And then when he hypnotized him and went into the future, the common theme as his clients are getting hypnotized is they're always shown two different paths. They're shown the path if they choose to heal the thing that they're currently struggling with, and they're shown the path if they don't. And so being able to see the future self, whether it's in this lifetime or in other lifetimes, is really motivating for people because they're like, oh. So the themes of my past life influence the life that I'm living today. And because they've been unhealed, I'm carrying those past lives with me. And if I look into the future and I see the choices that I make for the positive to heal how the past life is still living through me now and how it's taking me into the future, then maybe I'll feel motivated enough to make a change because I see what's possible. I'm just so fascinated by this stuff, you guys. Like, I literally feel like time travel, quantum fields, like different dimensions, all of that stuff is really, really interesting to me. And I feel like I want to dive into it even more because I just think the ability to experience multiple realities at the same time is the fucking coolest thing. I've actually experienced it. I did a family constellation therapy session with my friend Julie a couple of months ago. And in that, we did a healing for my 5-year-old self. I will never be able to put this experience into words because there were no words. I was just literally crying and witnessing and observing and really, really, really present, which made me realize that I was time traveling in a sense, or quantum traveling, I guess. But I was standing on a piece of paper and I was speaking to my 5-year-old self, and I could see the place where she was. I could see where she was in the bed. I could see myself talking to her, and I was telling her all of these things about the future. You're going to do this and you're going to do that and you're going to help people, and all of these seeds that me today in 2024 were planting back in 1996 in 5-year-old Kat. I know for a fact I was not in time. I was not in logical time. It didn't matter what time it was in that moment. I was circling some quantum tornado spherical like weird thing where I was just like, I'm here, but I'm there, but I'm here, but I'm also over there, but I'm talking to her, but I'm here in the present day, but I know I'm having an influence on her because she's listening to what I'm saying. And it was so fucking crazy. I will never be able to understand and really put into words exactly what it was. But I know without a shadow of a fucking doubt, and I don't care how crazy this sounds because I know my people out there will understand this, I literally time traveled back to me being 5 years old, and I implanted the seeds of healing in her so that she could then carry those seeds with her into the future. And those seeds were then helping me find my way through life. It made me really emotional because it proved to me that time is such a construct. Dr. Brian Weiss talks about this in the book. He says that our evolution is not based on time, but really, truly, he says that in the book, your ability to move forward in life is based on your lessons. Okay. So time is not how we should measure our growth, our evolution, our life, because we can literally experience so many different realities in one lifetime we make and the lessons that we learn. So, you know how many of us measure so many things in our lives by how much time that it took. And Dr. Brian Weiss is saying that is such a human construct that actually, if you measure your life by the lessons you learn, you will literally leap bounds forward if you use that as your measurement, is if you use lessons as your measurement. So don't measure your life by the time that it took you. Measure your life by the lessons that you learned. The more lessons you learn, the more you'll leap forward into the next one. That'll take you into the next one. And in those lessons are new people, new realities, new choices, maybe new jobs. Like, we're always moving forward. So I just thought that was the coolest thing because I feel like so much of my life has been kind of measured by time. Oh, it took me 28 years to understand myself. Well, maybe it would have taken me 8, but because I had certain life experiences, it took me a little bit slower, and that's okay. But now that I'm conscious of that, I know that with every lesson I learn, I'm able to move forward. And I'm actually seeing that a lot with my future self, because there's other things in my life that I'm working with in my future self and visualizing my future self. And as I start to visualize that future self, I can feel the lessons being pulled in my life through certain themes or signs or synchronicities or just constant little like, oh, I should think about this. Oh, I should work on this. Oh, and it like constantly comes up. I've noticed that the more I lean into them and the more I actually do the work to heal it and to really like understand it, to empathize with it and to have compassion for myself and learning that lesson, then I notice that a door is very quickly opened. The problem is, and many of us struggle with this, is that as soon as that door is opened, our nervous system and our bodies are like, holy shit, what's going on? This is so different. Abort, 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 go backwards. That's why nervous system healing is so fucking incredibly important, because it literally creates not only safety for us spiritually to move forward, but it creates safety in our bodies to feel like we have the ability to be ready to move forward. And that's the hard part. Tyler's reading this amazing book called Awareness right now, and he says that our fear of uncertainty is not actually the uncertainty because we don't know what's on the other side. It's the fear of letting go of what we're comfortable with, what we know right now. So even if our reality is not something that we are totally happy with, we may be comfortable in it. And the idea of letting that go is actually really scary for us. And our bodies are in survival mode a lot, like in good ways and in bad ways, good and bad, I guess. But our bodies are always trying to keep us alive and to keep us safe. And so if our bodies have adapted to an identity of feeling comfortable in something that's not in our highest and best good, well, at least we feel comfortable. At least we're alive, because the thought of doing something else is so scary. It's so different. So those are kind of the things that I was starting to really think about reading this book. And I actually found a past life regression therapist here in Denver. I just Googled and found her, and she does past life regression, and she does something called Between the Souls, which is basically like between your reincarnations. And so I booked a session with her on June 3rd. I will most likely be doing a podcast episode about this. But what this book was really bringing up for me is my relationship to my body. I have struggled with my body image my whole life. And I think reading this book, it was like my future self was calling to me through the book and saying, hey, a lot of this stuff is resonating with you for your work to teach people, which is beautiful, because at least, you know, there's someone like Dr. Brian Weiss in the world who holds the same values and morals and ethics and beliefs that I do, which was like very affirming and validating. But also the reason that a lot of this stuff is resonating with you is because it's bringing up something that you're really ready to heal. And it's this really warm, loving, soft voice in my head and in my heart, and actually feels like a warm embrace around my body. That's like, the reason that you're thinking about your body when you read about this is because it's time. You know, I struggled with body image stuff my whole life. I had an eating disorder on and off for like 12-ish years. I went to an outpatient eating disorder treatment facility at UCSD in San Diego, which actually made my eating disorder worse. I struggle with body dysmorphia. I've struggled with a lot of different things. In my family, there's two very extreme ideals and lifestyles around food and your body, and somewhere I got lost in that. And I really truly think that yoga, I don't think, I believe yoga healed my eating disorder like 80 to 90%. It really, really did. I just went through a deeply spiritual experience with yoga. I learned how to eat for my body, to fuel my body properly, to use my body for good and not tear it down and make it do all these fun shapes and flow with the energy. And I was like, oh, I actually really love my body. Like, and that took me from like 10 to like, I'm going to guess like 80%. But there's this lingering like 20% in the background that's just kind of like, am I ever going to be good enough? Am I ever going to be pretty enough? Am I ever going to be skinny enough? Or am I ever going to be healthy enough? It's always like this worthiness around the body. Well, I understand it very deeply from a family perspective and an ancestral perspective, like so deeply that I feel like I've gone into every nook and cranny with my family. And I feel like now I don't really have anywhere else to go with it because I've literally beat that dead horse down. So the fact that I picked up this book, The Future Self Called to Me, I'm healing a lot of things in my body right now with the SIBO and my iron and my liver and all these themes around those organs and, illnesses, I guess, or diseases. I feel like it was the perfect scenario for my body to be like, and me, deal with me with past life regression because there's something we want to tell you. It's like this little whisper. And my theory so far, and this will be confirmed in the session, it's 3 hours long, so I'm really excited. But my theory is that in many of my past lives, I've never felt comfortable being who I was, and I never felt like my body matched my heart or my body matched my intention or who I was. I've always maybe felt like, and this is purely just kind of downloading on whatever was coming through the book. But there's always been a disconnect with like, in one of my lives, I was a prostitute, but I really wanted a family and a home and a baby. And then I did get that, but I didn't have a father for the baby. Like just all these things that I think about, like, I know of another past life where I was a male soldier and I struggled with my sexuality because my soul has mostly been women. And so in that lifetime, I was like, I felt uncomfortable in my body and I knew that something was wrong with my sexuality and that like I didn't want to be killing and fighting people. And so I just know of already so many past lives where my body and being in my body has felt really uncomfortable that maybe in this lifetime, my soul was like, okay, we're going to give her a beautiful, healthy body. We're going to give her all these things. And then she's going to experience disease. And then how is she going to treat her body? What are the lessons around her body? What is, whatever it is, like whatever I'm learning, I don't know yet. This is just purely thought, but I'm curious to see what comes up because I think my past lives, a few of them, I can already kind of feel like 3 or 4 of them have something to teach me about my body. And honestly, I think, it's not a coincidence that my soul chose to be a female in 2024, with social media and the family that I have and the societal pressures and just all the different things. I think it's probably the perfect concoction for understanding how my past lives can help me. And I don't know if this practitioner does future life, but maybe I'll ask her about it and I'll report back because it's something I'm really open to talking about. I feel like I'm really open with myself, you guys. I feel like sometimes maybe too open. But I feel like, what do I have to lose? Honestly, my ego is really not attached to what I've learned, what I've gone through, what I've moved through. And I've always believed that if I uphold the integrity of my word and I make sure that I'm not sharing, someone else's story in my family, but I continuously just talk about how I'm moving through it and how it affects me and sharing, with my heart on my sleeve. I think that does more good than pretending like I have it all together because I really don't. I really don't. I don't think any of us do. So that was like my long tangent about the book. I strongly recommend reading this book because it is so phenomenal. You will learn so much about yourself. And my recommendation is that if you read this book and you start having these little, my body or this or that, you may have a past life that's calling to you, or you may have a future life and a past life all at the same time that's calling to you too, which is what I truly feel because I keep feeling like I'm on the precipice of meeting that future self. And then I always sabotage it somehow because I'm just not sure what's on the other side. I'm too afraid to let go of what I know now, even if it's probably way better than what I know now. Getting back to the trip in Kauai, it was such sacred energy on the island. We started our trip out in Poipu, and we stayed at this gorgeous little Airbnb condo overlooking right on the water, literally like there was grass and then there was rocks and the ocean. And every single day, Tyler's mom would sit out there and look for the turtles, and the turtles were like eating the algae on the rocks there. And it was sunshine and beautiful. I mean, I literally sat in the sun on a towel, read my book on my Kindle, and was just so at peace. like so at peace. I got my period the first day on the trip, which I was not happy about. But luckily, with all of the changes I've been making in my diet, being gluten-free, dairy-free, no refined sugars, only fruits, and like I think I did coconut sugar, no alcohol, all of the SIBO medications, like the natural antibiotics that I'm taking. My period was painful, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world. I didn't faint and get a concussion. I wasn't even close to fainting. And I just noticed it was healthier. It was just a better period. And so I'm seeing some of those benefits already. And then I think being in Kauai and getting my period, it was just like, okay, you have nothing to do, nowhere to go, nowhere to be. I sat in the Airbnb while Tyler and his mom went on a hike, and I just rested. And by the afternoon, I was good. And I was reading my book in the sun and getting a tan, and it was really great. And I think the biggest benefit I saw from the last 60 days of making so many changes in my body and the dietary changes as well is that on day 2 of my period, I was hiking like 6 miles. On day 3 of my period, I was hiking like 6 miles, and I was very, very active. That is not something I would normally be able to do on any other previous period week. I even said to Tyler, we were hiking a hike in Poipu called the Heritage. And I was like, Tyler, I'm on day 2 of my period and I'm hiking. And he's just like, okay, like, why are you announcing this in front of my mom and my stepdad? But like, I was so happy. Like, I was so joyful, and just being by the ocean. It's such different energy, you guys. And it was so really interesting to witness how in the mountains, everything is more calm. It's more grounded. The energy of it is just more here and present and kind of more solid. And then going to the beach, it was like, oh my gosh, wait, I can feel so much. And there's so many sounds and there's so many noises and there's so many movements. Like everything is just moving on the island. And I think that that was a really fun energy to be in for a week. But what was interesting is that I found myself like the last day of the trip being like, there's been too much movement since I've been here. I need to go back to my cocoon in Denver. And I actually missed home, which was so bizarre. Like we were flying home and I was like, I just came back from an amazing trip and I can't wait to be back in the mountains. And there's just something about being here right now in this time of life that just feels good for my soul. And it doesn't mean that I don't want to be by the beach, because literally Tyler and I came home and we were like, we should go to the beach more often. Like, do we want to live in the mountains? And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of liking it right now. And I don't know. I just think, the dream would be to have a house in the mountains and a house at the beach. Like that would be a dream. And we could just go and come whenever we please, and we could rent it out and Airbnb it out. And that would be like truly a dream. And so we'll have to put that on the manifestation list. But I think the ability to like go to Kauai with his family. My dad lives in the south of Italy some months out of the year, so we can go visit him. We're actually going in August. So I think we have just like many opportunities, including like San Diego, to go back home and just kind of be by the ocean whenever we want, which is really nice. On the second half of the trip, we went to Honolulu Bay. Now, don't get me wrong, Poipu is beautiful. I really, really liked Poipu. I thought it was very cute. It was very homey. There was a lot of like nice grocery stores with all the healthy foods and like great restaurants. Honolulu Bay is definitely more low key. It's a very small town. It's very local. Of course, there's like a nice hotel there, but we stayed at a cute little cottage, a 5-minute walk from Honolulu Bay Beach. And I just liked the energy of Honolulu Bay a little bit more. It was a little bit more green, more trees. The bay, it was really nice to swim in. People were surfing and paddleboarding, and it was a little bit more calm. It was just a really nice ability to walk along the beach. And it was just, I don't know, the energy of Honolulu Bay, I was just like, this is more my vibe. Love Poipu, but Honolulu Bay was more my vibe. So I feel like we will be revisiting Honolulu Bay in the future. And on the fifth or sixth day of the trip, we went on this really amazing hike in the Nepali coast. Gorgeous. We had to take a shuttle from Honolulu Bay to this other site that then we had to like walk up to the trail, the head of the trail. And we hiked along the Nepali coast, about 5.6 miles. I posted about it on my Instagram on part 3 and 4 on my Instagram, on the feed. And it was quite literally the most beautiful hike I've ever been on in my life. It was rocks and hilly, but like waterfalls and jungly. And then you hike down to a really private, like cozy little beach with caves. And you hike back up, and then it rained for 2 miles of the hike. And it was just such an incredible adventure. I had a smile on my face the whole time. And I was so proud of myself for doing the hikes, because I don't hike like 5-6 miles. I'm like a 2-3 mile hike and then like go get some food. Like this was like a real hike. Like our feet were in the mud from the rain, soaking wet, stepping in puddles, like, but it was warm out and it was just magical, so sacred. I have a new love for Kauai. As we were on the shuttle going from the parking lot near our Airbnb to the head of the trail, there was this like Hawaiian music playing, and this woman was talking about the history of Kauai. But the history of Kauai is really interesting, and it kind of made me sad at certain moments. You can definitely tell that the island has been colonized, and you can see and feel some of the maybe resentment or discomfort around how many white people there are on the island, and how many, Western influence, I guess, or like a trendy non-indigenous influence there is on the island. And I felt weird about it, because at some moments I was like, oh, I'm so glad there's something like a Whole Foods here. But then I'm like, oh my God, that's so like I'm cringing even just saying that out loud. But it's like the creature comforts that we have here, in Denver or California. It's like it takes away from the beautiful indigenous ancient culture of the Hawaiians and of Kauai. And so I found myself really wanting to extend warmth and love, and really I wanted to understand the island more. And so, everyone's sitting on the shuttle bus, and this woman is talking in a beautiful voice about the history of Kauai. And I'm looking around thinking, no one's probably fucking paying attention to this. But I was like taking notes in my phone, like, oh my gosh, like I really want to like honor the island and honor the people. And like, yeah, it just makes me sad that you can tell that it's really become something different than what it probably was, 300 years ago. But the nice thing is that with every hike that we went on, we'd stop at these lookouts or these little places where there were little historical plaques, and we would read about, in 1738, the king of Kauai, like he had his meditation place here, and he had all of his fruit being grown here, and you could see like the outlines of where the buildings were, and there was like ruins. And I was like, okay, like this is really interesting. I also love history, so I thought that was like a really interesting part of the trip. But I think my intention for the trip was really to just continue being open to receiving the wisdom of the people and the land of Kauai, because like our modern society has really walked away from so much of the indigenous beauty of what this earth was built on. And I think when I think about the future of this planet, I worry that things like AI and, colonization and constant construction and modern technology, I think it's just kind of taking away from the really important, grounded cultures and traditions of the people that came before us. And I think I'm more sensitive to that just because of what I do in my work. But now as an adult, I think I'm being faced with making just a more conscious effort to honor it even more, and to pay attention to my impact on how I have an influence on myself, my family, my children one day, like how we honor the people that came before us culturally and in our families as well. I think another thing that was really interesting for me on the trip that I was dealing with was the kind of push and pull between being a highly sensitive person. I think, when you're kind of thrown into a vacation with a lot of people that you love, but you are a highly sensitive person who has a very kind of strict routine. And I plan my life to be a certain way because it makes me feel good. And when you're on vacation, whether it's with someone else's family or my family or friends, you're thrown out of that like protective bubble that you're in. And so when I notice that protective bubble is gone, I tend to be highly sensitive to, what we're doing and where we go. And I'm actually not a very controlling person in the sense that like I'm willing to go anywhere and do anything and experience something. But I notice that as I get older and I become more intuitive and more sensitive and more in tune with energy, that I am constantly protecting myself with energy, doing inner prayer and just like being mindful of my breath and constantly regulating my nervous system like 100 times more than I used to before I started really getting into this work and working with energy. And I've noticed that some places that we went on the trip, I was like, my God, like if you can't see me on YouTube right now, I'm literally like my eyes are wide open and I'm like hyper vigilant. I'm like very attentive and I'm watching people and I'm like, oh my gosh, that person's energy. Don't read that person's energy. That person, don't read that person's energy. Just pay attention to yourself. And it's like hard sometimes. It's like boundaries. Like you don't need to leave your body or like disassociate or start reading people to know that you're safe. You're safe even if you're in a new environment. So I think that was kind of hard for me on the trip. And I know other HSPs will resonate with that too. It's just the constant like push and pull of like, I'm happy and I'm joyful and I'm comfortable. Oh my God, I'm in a new environment. This is really scary. I don't like this. Who is everyone around me? Am I safe? It's kind of that. And I think that may have showed itself a little bit on the trip in terms of me being maybe quiet or uncomfortable or start rambling about, like I just start like nervous talking and I'm just like, oh, okay, like don't read energy or don't do this. And I think what that kind of snowballed into is constantly searching for where I belong and how I belong. And I feel like my whole life I've been on this long search for looking to feel safe in who I am and also what I have in common with others. Like the whole time, Tyler and his family, they're having these beautiful conversations and they're talking about things that they're interested in. And I'm kind of the newbie on the trip and not new to their family, obviously, but just on the trip. I've never traveled on a big trip with them like this before for this long. And so I'm reading my past lives book and I'm thinking about energy and I'm thinking about all these like things that like nobody gives a shit about except for me. And it's like reminded me of my family where I just like have always felt like no matter where I am or what I do or where I go, I'm constantly in this like other realm in my head of like thinking about things that normal people on earth like don't think about. So then it was kind of bringing up for me like, oh, am I like an outsider and am I weird? And then, Tyler's mom is the sweetest woman and she really entertains half the shit that I talk about, which is so nice. My mom also does that with me too. She's like, oh, really? Like what? And so but Kim is really, really sweet and she'll just be like, I'm really interested in this, or I'll go off and talking about this book or past lives or whatever. And she'll ask me questions and she'll be really interested. And I can tell she's interested and I can also tell she's making such an effort to be interested because I'm her son's girlfriend and we're trying to connect. And so I think it was really sweet, but I ended up telling her a lot about this book and talking to her about past lives and mediumship and all of that. We ended up having like a spiritual conversation and I could definitely feel like I was a little bit of the odd one out, but not in a bad way. It was just like, this is the shit I like. Like, this is the stuff I like to talk about. If I could literally talk about this stuff all day long, I would. Look at me. I'm so lit up by them, but not everybody is lit up by this stuff. Tyler, he's used to it by now. I think he's just there along for the ride, which is really sweet. And they're so kind about it too. Like, I feel like my family would just be like, what the fuck are you talking about? But they're like, what about this? And what about that? So I don't know. I just constantly coming back to what I teach in FCT, which is like, how do we belong and how do we feel safe and belonging and also be true to who we are? And I think for someone like me who's always felt very different, I am just owning that I am different and that I'm not always going to have a ton in common with other people based on my genuine interests, but I can also make a conscious effort to find other ways to connect with people. And we did, and it was great. And a lot of those were through the hikes and talking about family or life or just playing games. Like there's other ways to connect with people. Not everyone has to go so deep like I do all the time. But I will say that I had many opportunities on the trip to really reconnect to the joy of life that I really felt like I haven't connected to in quite a while because life has been so busy and so different. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, I feel like life is not slowing down anytime soon. And I feel like it's only going to get busier. And so these trips that we take are just so, so important for the soul to be able to connect with that joy of being here on earth, being in life, being present in the human experience. And also something interesting in Many Lives, Many Masters, but also Same Soul, Different, or Many Bodies, Same Soul, Many Bodies, by Brian Weiss, the book I was reading on the trip, is they talk about how many of his clients have lived on different planets and different lives, and that they say that the reason that so many maybe alien species or like outside other earthly species came to Earth was because it was so beautiful, and no other planet was as beautiful as Earth was. And there was an energy about Earth that the oceans were so blue and the hills were so green and the skies were so blue and just all the colors of the Earth were so beautiful. And that's what really drew people to come to Earth and start kind of inhabiting it as a whole. And I thought about that a lot on the trip and just thinking, we get to be here on Earth, and Earth has some of the most beautiful nature and places to be and energies to experience. Don't take it for granted. Like, don't take it for granted ever, not once. And so, my favorite moment, actually, and this is kind of random, but my favorite moment on the entire trip was the third day we were there. We hiked in the morning, and then we came back, and I started reading Messages from the Masters, which is another Brian Weiss book that I downloaded because I'm on a Brian Weiss roll right now because I resonate with his work so much. And I started reading Messages from the Masters, and I'm sitting on a beach towel on the grass just right outside of the patio of our Airbnb, and the waves are crashing on the rocks in front of me, like 5 feet in front of me. And there's these gorgeous birds that are just like eating the grass and the worms, and some of them have red heads, and some of them are like bouncing really funny, and then the wind's blowing and it's warm but it's not too hot, and I'm drinking my coconut water, and this little gecko comes up onto my towel and I name him. And just this moment in time on the trip where I was so in my own energy, in this peaceful, beautiful place. There was this stillness in my life that I found in that moment that I have not found being in Denver. Um, and it's a peace that I used to experience a lot in San Diego, being by the ocean, being in that stillness and that quiet. And I think that that was my favorite moment of the trip, is just realizing I really like my energy. I really like myself. I really like my own company. I really like reading in the sun. I really like birds. Like, maybe that makes me the most boring person on earth, but like, if I can be here forever, I will. And it really prompted these other thoughts coming up about who I am and what I love to do, and really learning to just accept myself. I think there's a huge part of my future self that's calling to me in this way, saying, hey, like, listen, you loved being busy in your 20s, and even in the first couple years of your 30s, you loved being busy. You loved the adrenaline. You loved the high. You loved being, out and doing things. But, there's a lot of joy in just being with yourself. And there's a lot of joy in just being present with you and, with Tyler and your boys. And not everything has to be an adrenaline chase or chasing the high. Like, you can just be. And you don't have to be the most social person in the world. In fact, you can be the least social person in the world and be totally okay with it. And it doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks. And I just think that there's something relieving for me in that message from my future self, and just knowing that The older I get, the less social I want to be. The more I want to streamline my time and like use it efficiently and like do the things that I love. And like, if I love to work, like what a joy, because you know how many people in this world work and hate their jobs and hate working. If I love to work, why don't I just work? Why do I have to tell myself, well, you shouldn't? It's like, well, I love what I do. My job literally never feels like a job ever. Not once have I ever felt like, oh, I have to do a family constellation today. I'm like, oh my God, I get to do a family constellation. Oh my God, I can't wait to see how this person's doing. I can't wait to meet this person. What is the field going to show us today? Like, I'm always intrigued and excited by my work. So if I love to work, why not own it? If I love to just hang out at home and be in my home, why not just own it? Why do I tell myself that I should want to go out and be social and that I should go and see people and be, it's like, it's not, I'm just accepting that part of me now. And I'm excited about weird things these days. Like, we are furnishing our patio. Like, we have this little courtyard in our house with like a patio, and I just bought all the furniture for it. And I literally cannot wait to spend every morning and every evening and every solid afternoon out there, because I just want to be cozied up with a book or my laptop and just like work outside and be in fresh air. Like, I don't know. I just get excited about the weirdest things. I guess this is what it's like to be in your 30s. I think that on this trip, even just talking about it now in the podcast, I'm really seeing how deeply my future self was with me on this trip. And just reflecting on all of it has shown me how magical it is to be able to leave your routine and leave your everyday life to be able to reconnect to different parts of you. And I'm so grateful for all of the signs and synchronicities and even the internal calls or the internal pulls towards certain things that allow me to continue evolving on my journey. And I strongly, strongly recommend reading Same Soul, Many Bodies. It is such a profound book. I'm really excited to share with you guys my past life regression findings in a few weeks. I'm doing that on June 3rd, and I'll probably take some time to integrate it, but I'm really excited for it. And I'm sure that there will be some nuggets of knowledge in there for all of you as well. Thank you for joining me another week on the episode. I'm going to end it there because I got nothing else. That was my full download of the trip. You got everything from past lives to highly sensitive people to realizing that the mountains is where I am meant to be right now. And so I hope something in here today was just fun to listen to, supportive for you, beneficial in some way. Sending you so much love and gratitude for being here and listening to the podcast. And please remember, at the end of the month, I announce a winner for a free family constellation therapy session with me. I'm announcing it on May 31st. Please do not forget to rate, subscribe, and review the podcast. If you listen on Spotify and you can't review it, go to YouTube and leave me a comment. Screenshot all of that. Send it to me on Instagram. My handle is in the show notes, and I will put your name on the list and enter you in to win a free family constellation therapy session with me. Free, 2 hours, one-on-one with me, no cost to you. I usually charge $300. So if that is something that sounds interesting to you, please go and support the podcast as I continue to grow. Thank you for being here this week. I will see you next week on my client interview with my friend Ian. I'm having a male perspective client interview on family constellation therapy, and I'm super stoked about it. So hopefully we'll see you next week for that. Cheers, guys.